Hi, I am Matt, founder of Testfully. Today I'm going to give you a demo of Testfully. We will set up a couple of test cases together, run them against your local API, and try to run them against a staging API as well. At the end of this video, you will have a better understanding of Testfully and how it can help you to test your API without writing code or spending a lot of time. So you can focus on building your product rather than writing test cases for it. So the first feature that I want to go through is basically Testfully is the most important feature. It is test cases. When you log into your dashboard, you should be able to see a screen similar to this one. So just go ahead and click on the new test, and this is where you define your test cases. So we do support folders for better organization, but that is not mandatory, so we will leave it behind for now. Each test case will have a title that is something that helps you to understand what's the purpose of this test case. So I'm going to start with a very simple test case. So I will go ahead and put a title here. For example, because I'm going to do the health check of my API using Testfully, I will just do the health check of API. And one key difference between Testfully and other services is that Testfully supports test cases with multiple steps, and each step is basically a request response. So you can, technically speaking, have test cases with multiple steps. Each of them have their own request response payload and their own validations. So because this is very simple, we are going to just continue with one step. So each step again can have a caption which helps you to understand what was the purpose of that specific step. So I will say, for example, /status responds correctly to the request. So and that is basically the caption I decided. What do I want to? I want to send a GET request to this URL, which is my API. And then this is the endpoint that I can do the health checks. Do I need to set headers? No, but if you need, you can just click on new header and add as many headers as you want. I can't obviously set any payload because basically this is a GET request. So the most important part of a step is the validation. That's where you want to define what you expect from your API. So we support 4 different kinds of validations, and in future we are going to add more and more validations in this section. So what do I expect to receive as a response code? You can leave them blank if you don't want to have any validation, I can basically say, for example, I want to have a response code of 200, okay? Do I care about response time? Maybe yes, maybe not. I can leave it blank, but let's say I expect this to come back in 100 milliseconds, for example. Do I expect any response headers? No, we will go through that one later. What about response body? We can define the shape of the data that we expect here. So for example, I expect a JSON to have a field called OK, and the value should be true. So obviously your API response can be containing more fields and more information. That's okay. As long as it has this subset of data, it should be fine. So what we want to do now, when we are happy with this test case, we can just click on the save button and our test case is saved now. So I can come here to all tests and my test case is available here. I can click on it and, for example, I can just edit this one, say, okay, fine, it's 150 milliseconds and it is saved. So that is how you define test cases with basically Testfully's interface. So now that we have the first test case added to our system, we want to run it. One of the features that Testfully offers is that you should be able to run your test cases against multiple environments without doing any change. So what that means, it means that if you have a local API and then you have a test environment where you test things end to end, and then you have your production environment. So you should be able to run all of these test cases that you add to your dashboard against all of those environments without any change. So if I come to all tests and click on this little play button which says run, you can see that there is a drop down here that says environment. Well, what is environment? Environment is basically the environment name that you give to the hosted code that you have. Development environment, local machine, staging, production, whatever you can. So you can pick one of these and just click run. Obviously, we don't have any environments. So let's go and add a couple of environments. So we go to environment section, and here you see that it's obviously blank, and I will have, say, Matt's laptop is my local environment, obviously, and then I will have a new environment called staging and another environment called production. Right, that's pretty cool. So I can come back to all tests and basically click on this one. Obviously, I have these options. I can click on Matt's laptop. So one cool feature about Testfully is that you can run your test cases using your browser, or you can run your test cases using our servers. So when you are building your API, the best is that just try to use browser. It is the fastest, and basically you can use it as much as you want. And for when you want to test things end to end, you can always use our servers for your staging and production environment. And obviously, when it comes to monitoring, you can always leverage our servers for running your code and your test cases. So I will basically say, I want to run this environment, and I want to use browser. And so that's good. Obviously, my API supports CORS. If your API supports CORS, well, that's good. If it does not, you can install an extension in your browser that temporarily disables CORS for Testfully website. So I can go ahead and click run, and we can see that, yes, this test case basically failed. So let's see that what's happening actually here is it shows that obviously it tries to fetch this request and it does not exist. And yeah, that's no problem. I can see that it's actually there is a problem. I have probably configured the wrong endpoint here. So I can just go ahead and change that one. Let's go ahead and first fix this test case so it will pass for the next run. I know what's the problem. The problem is that I have provided wrong code and I have provided the wrong address. So now that should technically speaking solve the problem. Okay, let me run this one against Matt's laptop, and yeah, it's passing. You can see that it's sending the request to this address and everything is fine about it, which is good. One of the promises of Testfully is that you can run your test cases against multiple environments. So yeah, let's go and run this test case that we have against a staging environment. Well, that is passing. However, I am still hitting my localhost API. How I'm supposed to test this one against my staging environment, because that has a different URL. Well, we have a concept called configs in Testfully. This is something that you can leverage to fix this problem. So basically, what's the problem here is that each environment has a config, which is the URL, and that should be different per environment. Well, that's easy. We can come here and define basically base URL for our account. And this is just a string, doesn't really matter. And then I say the default value for this one is obviously for my local host. And for Matt's laptop, basically I will just say it is same for production. Don't worry about that one. For staging, we want to test it for now. We say this is my basically staging environment. Okay, that's good. So now we have a base URL. What we want to do is that obviously I want to fix this one. So every time that I run against a staging environment, this should point to the staging API. So I come back to my test case. I will go to the edit, and here you can remove this one. And what you can do, press parentheses and G and then colon. So it shows you the list of config values that you have. I select base URL here, and that is base URL, and I can just continue with my endpoint. Well, that's good. So now Testfully knows that every time that it runs a test based on the environment that you have picked, it fills the value for base URL. Let's test it again. That's good. I can run it against Matt's laptop. Yep, that is localhost and the tests are passing. And if I come back and run it against staging laptop, staging environment, that should be okay as well. Yes, it is hitting this endpoint, which is different, but it's the same response I'm getting, which is cool. That is good. So that's how you can define config values. And obviously config values are anything that you want to reuse between your test cases and things that it might be different per environment. So you can always define config values. If it is shared between environment, that's okay. You can just always have a default value and that does the job. You don't need to copy paste it for all of the environments. If you want to override, in this case, we have overwritten the default value, you can also overwrite it at any time. So, and that's how easy it is to use that value. So you can use configs for the URL. You can actually use for the headers as well. As you can see, I can just come to this one and this is available as well. So, and also if I, for example, go to a post, also in the request payload, I can also use it. You can see that's available. So is with the assertions. You can also use them here as well if you want, and in the response header as well. So basically, these are available in response body, response header, request, basically payload as well as the URL. Okay, now we got a working test and we can run that one. Let's go through the process of running tests one more time because there's a couple of items that I want to brief you about. So when you run a test, you have two options. You can run the test cases in browser and you can run test cases in server using our, obviously, infrastructure. They behave exactly the same way. They support the same features. Obviously, when you're building your API, the best is to use browser because it is the fastest, and obviously our servers do not have access to your local API. So you can leverage basically your browser to run your test cases. And for that one, your browser needs, your API needs to support CORS. If it doesn't, you can simply install a plugin in your browser that disables that one while you are using Testfully. That's basically for the browser run. But also you can decide to run your test case against any environment except obviously local environment using our servers. When you do that one, there is a special thing that happens, and that is that the result of that test execution becomes available for you permanently through the archive. So let's say I want to run this test against a staging environment. I don't want to run it through browser, and let's run this one. So now this is happening basically through our servers. And you see that it is passed. And if I come to past runs for that specific test, you can see that it is available here at any time. I can just basically come back and see, okay, at this given time, this basically test was passing against the staging environment. And that's something that it's available for all of the test cases. When you come to a test, there is a last icon here, pass run. You can click on it and we have a lot of filtering options. You can decide and narrow down the results because after a while this is going to grow, so you can just limit it to a subset of the test results. Our health check API is a usable test. We can make sure that our API is always available, but I want to be a bit more pragmatic about testing. For example, I want to know that if a user with valid username and password can log in and get access tokens. So I want to do something like that. What I want to do is that obviously for that test I need a set of username and password, and that's going to be different per environment. So I'm going to come here and define a user email as a config, and we can say this is let's say math plus demo at testfully.io. That is my default value. Obviously, it's the same for maths laptop. I'm not bothered with these two environments for now, and that's good. I will define another one. So user password, again, that's string, and the default value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's same for my for maths environment. Cool. Now I want to define basically test scenario that I can do the login. Okay, cool. That's fine. We say active users should be able to log in using their email and password. Okay, that's good. And then login API responds correctly. That's good. And then post, what's my URL? Okay, I start with the base URL, and that's the API URL that I have. What is my basically payload? So that's good. Obviously, I can say that this is basically whatever information you want to send as a request. Let's say ID is 123, and then kindly sign in. This is very specific to my example, and the payload is email, and that's my email here, and then that's password, and that's my password. So you can see that I can include obviously email and password in request. Oh, that's pretty much what I want. Send this one please to my API, and I do expect to receive a 200 OK for now, and that's pretty much what I want. Okay, let's save this one and go back to the test cases. I have it here. Obviously I can see, yep, that's good. The payload is here. There is a syntax highlighter for JSON payload, so that makes your life a bit easier. So is with the response body here and response headers. So I will come back here and try to run this test on my local environment, see what happens. Okay, that's a little bit of a problem. So it says a network error. Obviously my API has some issues. I can't access it now. And I'm getting the network error. So if you have this kind of errors also, you can see that it is error, it's not failed because we couldn't send the request at all. That's okay. I come back here and let's say, what was the problem? Yes, I know what was the problem because I forgot this one, and that's no problem now. I can come back here and run my test again. And boom, that is passing. So you can see that this payload was passed to my request, math plus demo at testfully.io, and that's the response that I got. Well, that's pretty cool. Let's basically do a bit more assertion on the response. I expect to receive this field, and I expect to, in the body, I have the workspace ID that I want here. Cool, that's okay. I can basically do those as well. So I will come back to my test case. In the validations, I say I want to have the success true, and I want to have a field called payload, I believe. That was the name of the field, and the workspace ID should be this one. I think this was data maybe, I don't remember. Anyway, so that's the benefit, that we can just run it. So let's run it one more time. And let's see what's happening here. Yep, something is wrong. Data.workspace ID meant to be a string, but it is null. Obviously, oh, that's not data, it is body. And there's no dramas. We can just change this one and say, okay, this is body, sorry. Okay, let me save this one. Back to my test, run it again, see how it goes. Yep, it is passing. So obviously I got the workspace ID that I wanted. In this response, and the success is true. That's how you basically test something like a login scenario. Okay, that's quite straightforward. This test case is quite powerful. We didn't simply send a request to an API and saying that, oh, it responds with 200, okay, without doing any serious thing. We did the actual logging process. It engages your database. Definitely you have encryption for username and passwords, and everything is engaged. So this is a really good end-to-end test that makes sure that one very important feature of your application, which is the sign-in, works. So at any time we can verify this one. This is fantastic. So what I want to do next is that I want to have the same kind of thing for the user signups, okay? I want to say, okay, can I sign up a user using the username and password as well or not? Okay, that's easy. We could go ahead and create everything from scratch, but I just want to just showcase another feature that Testfully has, and that's the duplicating a test. So I just want to duplicate this test, and instead new users should be able to sign up. And that is, I duplicate it and I'm here. So I said that sign up API responds correctly, and that is the URL, the payload. I want to change it to sign up. And so what email and password I should provide here? Well, I can't provide this email address because that user exists. So what I will do, I will say, for example, let's say Matt plus demo2 at testfully.io. Okay, and for the password, I can just, for example, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. That's not a good password. Don't use that one. So that is my basically sign up payload that I want to send by API, and well, for now I'm just bothered with success true. Okay, that's how I expect it to be. Cool. So now that is my sign up API. Did you notice that I added this test case in less than 30 seconds? That's how fast you can add test cases, right? That's sweet. Let's run this and see what's happening. Again, Matt's laptop, run it locally, and it failed. Okay, it failed. Why it failed? Because I have not provided name, which is okay. I can just go and fix this one. I can come back here and say, what's your name? I can say it's called KFC. Okay, so that's good. Let's run this one again. And yep, that went through. We signed a new user with this username and password, and actually I can just log in with this one. That's pretty cool. So the sign up works now as well. Let's go back here. If I run it this one more time, you guess the problem here. The problem is that this user already exists in our system. So we ran this one once a couple of minutes ago, and now that we run it again, it failed. Obviously this user exists in our system, and that's what we expect. Well, that's not good, because what should I do? Should I just come here and say, well, fine, demo3. Yep. Now if I run this one, you see that's passing. Run it one more time. Obviously we know that what's going to happen. You know, that's not good. This is a quite a fragile test. It breaks very easily, and obviously this is not good. So we thought of these problems as well, and we support the kind of thing that you want to know, and that is data generators. So next time that you want a random email address for your API to be tested, what you can do is, rather than providing the email address, you can put parentheses and then type R, and you can pick one of the templates that we have. Today we have 3 templates. You can generate a random email, random string, and a random number, but watch the space, because we are going to add a whole other types as well. So that is the email I want, and the password, I could use this one, that's okay, but you know what, I wanted to use a string as well here as a basically my password. That's how I wanted to do. That's okay, that's a string. And for this ID to my request 123, you know what, I want to just generate this one using a number as well. That's okay. Okay, that's good. Let's save this one, come back here, and run this one again, my friend. Let's see what's happening. Yep, Beautiful. You see, a new email is being generated, complete random password and a complete ID. This is really useful. Why I think this is really useful? Because imagine that every time that you run this test, there is a new set of data generated and passed to your API. So your API is tested against a new way of sign up. So it's new email address, new password. So you can catch all of these edge cases because you can run this test as many times as you want, and that's beautiful. So that's how we fix this test case that was fragile by using this random data. So that's very easy. If I go back to this one, if you provide this parenthesis and then R followed by colon, you can just pick one of the options. Where do you use this random data? You can use in the URL if you want, in the payload, you can do in the validation, anywhere that you can provide value, you should be able to use it as well. So you can use these data generators next time that you need to generate some sort of data rather than hard coding it, because that way your test becomes more realistic. That's how users are using it. They provide different email addresses, they provide different domains, so you can test this one. This was the real power of random data generators. That's pretty cool. The problem that I have personally with this is that, well, obviously I'm going to run all of these test cases against my staging environment, or I might need to run them against production environment to verify that everything is working. And that's going to create a random user which I cannot identify if this user is basically added to our system for integration purposes, and or this is a real user. So what I want to do, actually, I want to have a specific email address. There are a couple of ways that you can do this one. For example, one way could be that I have, for example, a number here, and then at for example, demo.com. So that obviously works. So if I save this one and run this test again, you see that the email address is this one. Now I can say, okay, whoever is registered with demo.com, obviously it is for this purpose. That's one way of doing it, which is totally fine. There are better ways as well. So what you can do is that if you want to have random data and you want to have control over the shape of the data, we have a solution for you called data templates. A template is basically instruction for Testfully to generate data with a specific shape. So I want to generate, for example, demo, for example, say test account, and what test account email, and I want this to be an email address, and I want the domain to be testcompany.com.au. So what that means is that I can now use this template, and every time that Testfully generates a new email address using this template, the domain will be test-company.com.au. So let's go back to my test here, and I will edit it. And in the payload, I will ditch this section, and I will go here and say, against the way you will import it is that to put those parentheses and then T colon and then test account email is available here. Okay, let me save this one. I can run the test case again. And yep. So you see they provide a random name, but the domain remains testcompany.com. That's how I would personally go and delete all of these test cases, test users, sorry, at some point, if I'm concerned. And sometimes you have a specific requirement. For example, ID. Say our API expects ID to be more than 1,000 and less than 10,000, okay? When you use random data generators like something like this, you really don't have control over the output of it. So do you want to have control? Well, sure. Let's create a new template called request ID, okay? and that's it. I will say I wanted to have it a number, and what's the minimum you want? I want minimum to be 1000. What's the maximum that you want? Okay, maximum is 10,000. So I can save this one. I can go to my test again and just type parentheses T, and then here is the request ID. So I can put quotations, and my JSON is now valid. And let's try to run this test case one more time. And you can see that 1045, this ID never becomes less than 1000 and never greater than 10,000. So you have control over this. You can define as many as basically data templates you want. Currently, we support the string, number, and email. Again, we have planned to introduce all sort of other data templates. For example, you can generate UUID, first name, last name, address, postcode. We are going to add more and more data templates to basically to this system as well. Okay, back to our tests. So we have now 3 very useful test cases. I can just run them. Let's see how it works. But there is not really a way to run all of them in one go. You have to click on all of them. So, and there is no organization, it's just all here. We have thought of this problem as well, and we introduced a concept called collections, which is basically a way for you to group relevant test cases together. So you can have as many as collections you want, and you can add test cases to them. So a test case also can be part of more than one collection, so there is not one-to-one relationship between them. I will come to the new collection, link, click on it, and I will, for example, say the title would be, so for example, the critical test cases. These are what are really matter to me, and they all should pass before I release something. So I can just click on the scenarios that are test cases that I have here. For example, I have these 3 test cases, and that's good. There's one more very cool feature about collections that is about automation. So what that means is that you can, technically speaking, configure your collections to be executed in background on behalf of you, and while basically your server is running. So that's very good for monitoring. I can say that, hey, run this basically collection against the staging environment, and every minute start at, for example, let's say, for example, today, January 1st, finish it, for example, on this day. Well, if I want to, if I don't want, I can just skip this one as well. That's okay. And my test case is enabled. You don't need to provide time zone because you don't have a start and end date. If you have a start and end date, you can provide as well. This automation is enabled because I wanted to use it straight away. And how do I want to be notified if any of these test cases fail? Well, I want to be notified on every failure, every 2 minutes, every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes. I say, for example, I want to be notified every 15 minutes because this test runs every minute, and once I receive a notification, I know that I should fix the problem. I don't need to receive a notification for another 15 minutes. So I picked that one. And how do you want to receive alerts about basically the failures? We have 3 options here. So you can receive email alerts, which is active because I have verified my email address. You can connect your Slack workspace using our dashboard, and when that's connected, you can just toggle this one as well. And if you want to receive SMS as well, and that's possible, you just need to update your mobile number, verify it, and then you are good to go. Well, I have a collection here with 3 test cases, and I have automation as well. So I don't need to necessarily have automation. It is an optional thing actually. So I can just go ahead and delete this one and say, well, I have just one collection with these 3 test cases, and that's it. And obviously you can have more than one automation. For example, you can have one every minute for production. For the staging, that doesn't really matter. I can just run it every 1 hour. That's also possible as well. You can add as many as you want. So I will go ahead and delete these stuff because I really don't need them now. And I can just click on the save button. Cool, my collection is saved and there are three basically test cases here. So if I come to the collections, I can see that this is the critical test cases. There is no automation configured for this one. There are 3 tests included in this one. I can click on the run and run it. What would happen if I click run here? What happens is that all of the 3 test cases in this example are going to be executed against the environment that I picked in parallel. So it's going to be really fast. They are not going to wait for one to finish to start the next one. So I can just run this one and voila. I have 3 test cases that are all passing, and if I want, I can just click on them, basically see the results of it. And that's how collections work. We covered automations briefly when we talked about collections, but I think they deserve a bit more time, so let's go back to them. The purpose of automation is basically API monitoring. Automations comes to the picture when you have an API running in production environment and you haven't changed anything, but you constantly want to make sure that everything is working, because things can break while you haven't changed anything. For example, database can go down or all sorts of other things. So automation is built for that purpose. So you can attach automations to collections. In this case, I will click on the new automation and you can say, I want these 3 test cases to be executed against a staging environment every minute. And if you are basically required to run these test cases within the specific period of time, you can pick that one as well, but that's not important. Here what is important is that you want to configure alerts as well. So obviously I can say, yep, I want to receive notification every 15 minutes. I want to receive through email. As I mentioned in my previous video, you can have Slack and SMS as well. So let me go ahead and save it. As soon as you press save button, what's going to happen is that Testfully is going to start running these test cases every minute till you delete it, or if you have set a start date and end date, you can just end automatically. What's really important is that you can come back to this collection and add more test cases or exclude any test cases that you have. That's totally possible, and there is no issue with that one as well. How do we run the test cases? Obviously we run on our server, so you don't need to have this browser open, or you don't need to provision any servers to run those test cases. You just need to make sure that your API is available. That's pretty much what you need to do. Okay, so I will save this one. And if I come to automations, you can see that there is automations against the staging environment. We have configured to receive alerts through email, and it is going to be executed every minute. So, and it is obviously active. I can edit it if I want, I can delete it if I want. And if I click on the past runs, obviously I can see that, and right now there is nothing here because Testfully is about to start running this one for you. So if we come back here in a minute, it's going to pick that one for us. And you can add as many as automations you need to. So it's time to see that what our automation does. So let's click on the automation that we have now. So we have critical test cases, and you can click on the past runs, and you can see that it is running it every basically minute, and it is failing. One of them is failing constantly. Let's have a look at that one. Yes, I can see that it tries to log in using this one, and obviously this username and password does not exist in our staging environment. It's very easy. I can come here to the config for or environment in the staging environment, and now I have user email and password. I can just provide the username and password here, and that should fix my problem. So, and I am getting the emails every now and then because these tests are failing. So that's how the monitoring actually works. So I can click on it. Obviously you can see that this specific API has some issues. That's all, my friend, for today. A quick introduction to Testfully. Testfully offers a free plan which includes all of the features that I have demoed for you today. Please go ahead and create your account and give it a go. See you next time.